there's a lot of things that give us hints as to what is going on in the brain and maybe a little bit how, but it doesn't tell you why, right? It doesn't tell you why are we set up this way. And so that led me down the path to say, well, what if I just zoomed in closer?
Sam, coffee, tea, or something else? What fuels your mornings?
Definitely a utilitarian coffee drinker for most mornings.
Yeah, I love that. I've just navigated back to it myself. I've been trying a few different things, but I don't think you can get away from coffee.
Yeah, it's definitely a necessary fuel. But I'm not averse to tea. I'm very open to it. That may be a little later in the morning. It's just
Yeah,
the pull the engine to start kind of thing.
a little top up later on.
There you go.
When you were a kid, what did you think you'd grow up to be?
Probably some kind of scientist, neuroscientist, psychologist. Maybe go into being an actual doctor. Definitely didn't go and end up that way. I think that's part of the journey, which very much happy to dive in. Maybe a little bit, but
Yeah,
very much grew up in a scientific household. Parents were biologist, biochemist. So that was sort of the default path. Let's just say.
yeah, that makes sense. That makes a ton of sense. What's one technology that you can't live without?
Oh, can I name 10? If I had to pick one, it'd probably be like my phone, right? It's just like,
That's like picking 10.
yeah, exactly. That's a cop out, really.
Yeah,
But a lot of lives are pretty central around there.
it's true. It's true. And if you could fast forward 10 years and see one impact that your work's made on the world, what would you want that to be?
Yeah, this is a great question. I would love to see our products and technologies, basically being the little silicon brains and all of the electronics around us. So I'd like to have sort of the gadgets we have feel much more like an ecosystem with lots of different animals and plants, but in this case, sort of different kinds of smarts on these devices. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. Well, welcome to Machine Minds, everyone. I'm your host, Greg Tarusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Sam Falk, co-founder and CEO of Femto AI. Thanks for being on the show today, Sam.
Great to be here, Greg.
Yeah, I'm glad we got you on. Let's jump into it. So can you take us back? I know you hinted at it here a bit about your background and all of that stuff, but what were the early signals in your life that pointed you towards building deep tech and moving away from that like psychiatry, biology, scientist kind of route?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of, are you doing sort of the building of deep tech, or are you trying to do the understanding? Because definitely early in life, it was very much on the science side, like trying to understand the world around us, right? And maybe we'll get to it, but deep tech was sort of the avenue to which to understand. But, I don't know if, before phones, of course, it's like your bathroom readers would be things like, magazines or newspapers or stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So at least in our household, the kinds of magazines would be sort of the science magazines. So like the Discover, Scientific American, some kind of Frontiers, right? And so it would always be looking at sort of the brain articles, right? Where it's about sort of like, how do minds work? Why do we think the things that we do? How do we think the things that we do? So that might have been, if you want to see an early signal, that's like, okay, something along the compute intelligence path was maybe going to be in the future. There was, of course, a builder side too. I definitely had my fair share of building things. I built like a trebuchet as a kid. I built like canoes, right? So yeah, I think if you put those two together and look, back with 2020 hindsight, you say, okay, yeah, this will probably be the kind of area that you end up in.
Interesting. And what problem did you become obsessed with that eventually led to starting Femto AI?
The problem is that as humans, we have the capacity to ask why. So, one of the fundamental issues with sort of the science and the scientific method is that, you can keep asking why, and eventually you'll run into the ocean of the great unknown where nobody knows, right?
Yeah.
So this was particularly, it's true of everything, right? In my case, it was sort of this, how does the brain work? How do you, how do you know thyself question, right? Where it's like saying, okay, you can you can describe maybe what's and hows with something like psychology. Is like, okay, yeah, there are these sort of biases, there's these, like visual illusions. There's a lot of things that give us hints as to what is going on in the brain and maybe a little bit how, but it doesn't tell you why, right? It doesn't tell you why are we set up this way, right? And so that led me down the path to say, well, what if I just zoomed in closer, right? Instead of thinking behavioral, with, like prison experiment stuff, or I looked at actual like neurons and tried to record from them and listen to them. So that was all like neuroscience. Again, it was yes, you can do lots of analyses. You can correlate this brain activity to this behavior, or these two brain activities. Cool. But again, it doesn't tell you why. So that was always this missing piece that had been missing for me. And then, at that point, you reach that shore of the great unknown. So then I decided, this is actually talking to like a lab tech after listening to, a few hours of signals from like a monkey brain or something. It sounds like rain if you've ever listened to these things, where it doesn't matter if it's human, monkey, animal, like we're all sort of the same neurons, right? It's very, it just kind of feels like noise that you're listening to and you're trying to make sense of it. Because whether you believe in intelligent design or evolution or whatever process, like there is no designer's manual that tells you sort of why things are arranged that they are. So reached that shore of the unknown, turned around and said, okay, well, let's say we pick up one of these building blocks of how the brain works and, make something out of it, right? Because if we can build something out of the Legos, then, I can tell you why I arranged it in a certain way. And so I can build my own why instead of trying to find or ask some, unanswering universe why. We create your own why. And so that was sort of the turn into building deep tech and building circuits and computers that are very much work like the brain. So,
wow,
long answer.
Okay. No, but I mean, it's super. And I think that's like the foundation for this company and why you've built it, the product, the way that you have. But was there a moment when you knew this needs to be a company and not just, research project or a problem to solve?
Yeah. Definitely a right time, right place kind of thing. So, I'd find my way after making that turn into engineering into, Stanford Electrical Engineering PhD program. The lab was called the Brains in Silicon Lab. It really was, the field is called Neuromorphics. So it's sort of take this idea of biomimicry. So you look at biology, you see sort of the form and function of things, and you apply it to electronics in this case. So, you very much can take the equations that govern a neuron and build that in circuitry or some level of equation, some kind of abstract model. That's all possible, right? So it was building systems really out of electronic circuits that really did, have the same behavioral equations that you would have in your own head, which is very cool. And what we had, I guess what myself and my co-founders, had noticed is that, well, it's a very long project because you're building chips, you're building silicon, you're building systems, is that this stuff all gets very complicated very fast. It's not so much anymore like an artist colony. You go, you build one little circuit, you make it, you test it, you publish, you leave. It was like, 5 people or 10 people working on one project. And we get sort of like, one publication out of that or one system out of that. And then everybody leaves at the same time. So, once you reach a certain level of complexity, it has to sort of be a different kind of vehicle to develop it. Like in the lab, you have sort of limited funding. You can't pay grad students very much. So actually, they don't get paid very much. You lose them every time they actually learn to do their job. That's kind of the point of an education, is to not be in education or as a student forever. And so a lot of things were the barrier to like pushing this technology further. In parallel, people thought AI was cool, right?
Yeah.
When I started or when I was a kid, people were like, why would you ever want to do like brain stuff? It's like, it never works. It's unreliable. It may still be a little unreliable, but it's gotten to the point where at least the value proposition is proven and people can see that. So that's why I said at the beginning, it's like timing was like perfect, right? It's saying that, okay, commercially, people saw this is with, AlexNet beating AlexNet beating ImageNet, and proving that AI is interesting. And more recently, of course, ChatGPT, LLMs invading all of our lives. And we happen to finish our PhDs around that time, right? And so now it's like, you look around, you say, hey, is anybody doing this? Like, can I work on this elsewhere? And didn't really see it. So it's like, okay, let's start a company.
That's awesome.
We can actually pay people. We can, get that commercial engine to create the flywheel effect where, you mass produce something, you get revenue, you can of course roll that back into developing and pushing technology further along versus sort of relying on taxpayers to essentially, having a program manager accept a grant and then deploy some of our hard-earned tax dollars to make things work. So saw the opportunity and basically took it.
Awesome. All right. So for someone hearing about Femto AI for the first time, how do you explain what you're building?
Yeah, so we make AI run in the real world. So in things that you can see, feel, touch, like things you hold in your hand. These are things like, glasses, earbuds, headsets, your appliances, the robots, right? So these are devices that all want AI, or the product designers want AI in them. But they are all limited by, it's very hard to deploy large systems that consume a lot of power and that cost a lot. So what we do is that this goes back to the beginning. We take ideas from, say, neuroscience, biology, and apply them to circuit designs. So we build chips that take these principles in. We can go into it a little bit. And we build full systems on top of them. So at the end of the day, there's a little chip, has a ton of software, and it has an AI application running on it. And this is what enables, say, your voice interface in your glasses or your Roomba, your next generation Roomba or equivalent, or your robot to help navigate the world, right? It's this tall stack of technology from silicon all the way up to basically software and feature that we deliver to our customers. So all based on these principles of that we think are useful from neuromorphic engineering or neuroscience.
Awesome. And obviously timing was right to start a company to work on this. But why does this matter right now, this product, and like those products that you mentioned where having this chip in there?
We are very much straining. We're not maybe breaking yet, but we're very much straining Earth as an ecosystem to do this AI build out. It's like, where are you going to even put these data centers? Can you get the materials from them? Do you have the supply chain, right? How much energy and water they can consume, right? Are we going to have more interesting weather to talk about in the future because of all this, right? Like these things are all growing, and we're also straining like the financial systems, right? Is like okay, how much private equity capital is there? How much capital is there to sort of redirect into the system, right? So, you look around and you look at what these AI systems can do. Like they can do some really amazing things, but they can also be really stupid in other ways. So there's still a gap between like you and I walking around as like real people with real brains operating in the world and sort of what these systems could do. Plus, we're kind of scaling up to question of like what end, right? Like, are these the right things to scale, right? Is this going to take us to that utopian dream of, AGI robots like living amongst us? Like, I don't think so. I think we still need a few innovations along the way. So we sit in that space of, what are the innovations still necessary to take us to, intelligence everywhere, right? And basically the thesis is that there is a lot to be learned from how living things do it. And we are basically commercializing that in our technology. So, you ask sort of why now? Well, what's the alternative? The alternative is, we go into the biggest, economic redirection of all time, of all human history. And, if you believe that it's just sort of scaling up what we have is going to take us there, then that maybe is the right thing to do. But I think there's definitely a growing body of opinions that's like, well, there's something else is sort of missing. Like, what's that missing ingredient? And so you could think of a Femto AI as trying to find that missing ingredient or find parts of it to really bring it to the conversation, get it actually used so that we don't destroy the planet and we don't destroy everybody's like 401ks along the way.
So as a customer implementing or adopting your technology, I'm assuming I'd be like the manufacturer of the glasses, the wearable, the robot. What changes for me once I adopt that technology, once I start using your chip?
Yeah. We work with our customers in a number of ways. So a lot of our customers, maybe unsurprising, they're not really AI teams or people. Like they have great industrial design, they can pull together electronics, they can manufacture, they can sort of think about the user experience, but they don't really do AI development, model definition, data collection, data curation, quality control, all that stuff, right? So this is about like half of our customers. We basically give them a feature, right? We give them a feature of like, okay, you want a voice interface, you put this chip in with all the software that we deliver with it, you will have a voice interface, right? That's sort of, it's a very simple interface. So that's maybe half of the customers. Other half of the customers, and these tend to be maybe some of the bigger ones, or the very small ones who are just startups. It's like, they're all in on AI. They have like AI teams, and they want to, basically, they know their user the best because they're making the product, and they want to use AI to deliver some kind of, next generation feature to that user, right? Because we had to, for a lot of customers, build out the whole stack, like Silic's, like sand to feature. We have a lot of tooling that makes it very easy for other people to do the same, right? So if they think they have the latest and greatest language model that will help you Q&A with your car, fine, cool. Here's a tool chain that will help you. Awesome. Like I will help you. You can basically easily deploy that model down to this chip. It will run in a much smaller piece of silicon, area of silicon that you could with other systems. And so that enables you to bring your feature to market and ultimately get your customer's product sooner rather than later.
Interesting. Very interesting. Do you have like a ideal customer profile? You mentioned they're like early stage startups are all in on AI, big companies along the way. It sounds like it could be pretty much anyone trying to implement this kind of tech.
Yes, I think because AI is very broad based, right? It's we take much more of a meeting the customer where they are philosophy. So,
Okay.
I'm happy if a customer doesn't have AI capabilities, I'm very happy to essentially give them a feature, especially if we've already built it, say for, other customers, right? Or something very close to it. But I also know that customers have a preference often to be the ones to sort of define that feature and take on that development, right? They can sort of take it that not even last mile. It could be 100 miles from sort of whatever foundation that we provide them when it comes to tooling the models to what they want their users and customers to experience, right? So we can support kind of both. I would put them in those two tracks. Ideal. There's trade-offs to everything, pros and cons for both kinds. But just like some people may prefer to go to a restaurant to have the chef prepare all the meals for them. Some people are really passionate about cooking and cooking at home, and improvising, doing what they want with the ingredients, really exploring there. That's the same way with our product designer customers too. And I think it also depends on where they want to focus. Like if they want to focus on, being the lead on AI, basically being the chef, no problem. Like we have the kitchen to make you help you do that, right? If you kind of just want to get something out very quickly, like that's your strategy as a customer, no problem. There's already sort of dishes and recipes ready to go that you can go. And if that's your strategy to attack the market, cool. We have something for you too.
Awesome. I'm curious about your entrepreneurial journey and the learnings along the way. So you left or once you graduate from the PhD, then you started the company straight away.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? So
technically, the company even started before we left the PhD. It's just graduation timelines and all that. But yeah, it's pretty much straight into this startup.
Wow. How long have you been running the business now?
Let's see, PhD was in 2018. Finished that, so we're going on, 7.5 years at this point. It's something that one of my joke is that I've never had sort of a quote unquote real job.
Right.
All the learnings on engaging with customers, what is the right technology. It's sort of on the job, first principles learning. So
love that.
That's been a fun journey. Never had a boring day in all these years.
No time to have a boring day when you're running a business. What's harder than people think about building a company like this?
So I'm gonna talk about a lot of this comes from what is your background like. So I'll probably be speaking more to founders or potential founders who maybe have similar background. So my background, basically straight from school to school to school to school. I think it was on grade whatever 20 something. Through the end of the PhD. But the idea is that okay, you have some technology that you want to commercialize because you either really love it in the lab or you think that it really could be valuable. Or you want to continue to work. Whatever the reason, cool. There are definitely different incentive structures in something like academia versus what you might need as a requirement and as a commercial entity. And that there's not really a smooth handoff. Like nobody will sort of tell you these things beforehand, or you may not appreciate them even if they do tell you. So two buckets is like when you're trying to just sort of push the frontier of engineering and science, right? You're trying to, by definition, be a little bit weird, right? Try to make as many sort of differentiating things and show that it's like better or better in some way. So some kind of benchmark, and you do better, and it's like, okay, great. This is a novel contribution to the field, right? Hopefully better in a few different ways. What isn't so much prioritized is how easy is it to use, right? How reproducible and reliable and manufacturable is the technology, right? So you think about on the commercial end, I just gave you sort of two customer profiles, right? Both of them very, very, very much care if this is an easy to use technology. Now, the ones who are buying sort of the full on chip plus software given feature, I'm sure that that's a fairly straightforward interaction. But the ones that want to, say, build their own AI because they think they have a unique point of view on their customers, they want to have that. It has to be easy for them as well, right? Nobody wants to go and learn the ins and outs of your technology. You might even want to tell them the ins and outs of your technology, right? So you got to find that interface that keeps the energy barrier to adoption fairly low, right? So that's on the sort of ease of use. Is just, are you easy to work with, right? That's sort of test one, and then test two is like, well, you're probably going to make more than one of these systems. Like, very cool if you can make, one system or 10 systems that, is best in class, state of the art on some kind of, I don't know, language benchmark, reasoning benchmark, power efficient, like whatever you care about as, when you're trying to sort of, push the frontier a little bit in your direction of innovation. But when you want to commercialize, like, you want to have customers, plural, many customers, right? And so all of them are going to be thinking about like, okay, well, can I even access this technology? Like, can you make me, I'm one of like, 8 billion people in this world. And if all 8 billion people could buy it, well, okay, I have to make 8 billion systems that, kind of behave as I'm telling people it behaves, so reliably, consistently, and, at a price point that they can afford to. So that's where the incentives from like academia and industry are quite different in some respects. And so, that I think that could be its own sort of area that people look at more closely, but that's definitely something that has been in those on the job learnings over the past 7.5 years, is sort of adapting the technology to that. And it's really real. It's like, we are not using, like, we started the company with a chip platform, right? That is not what we are actually commercializing today, 7 years later. We basically decided 2-3 years in, that's like, okay, the specifics, the implementation details of the platform that we had were not going to meet the requirements of the commercial industry. Not that I didn't have good ideas, but just some of the details made it very hard. And so we did a big pivot in pandemic era, where a lot of people were thinking hard about their lives, maybe. And we said like, okay, there are good ideas of this research. The good ideas that we particularly picked out was, sparse math. Your brains not everything is happening all the time. It only happens sort of as needed, and localized compute. You zoom in on these neural circuits and a lot is happening at the very, very sort of local level, right? But these ideas of sparse math and local processing, they're not tied to specific implementation details. Like, you can take them and you put them on a standard computer. So this is where we decided, like, okay, well, why don't we put this in a form that is easy to program, easy to use. I can make 1 million just as easy as I can make 1 billion of these things without spending, thousands of dollars trying to get things to behave, consistently, right? And so that's kind of where we are today, right? Where we're saying, okay, we have the principles that's embedded in the platform that we have. I'm happy to sell you 1 million or 1 billion of these things, however many you want. I know predictably how many I'm going to get from the supply chain, or what's it going to take to get a certain amount. And so, yeah, that was really sort of what enabled us to go as far as we have today.
Interesting. Because it's obviously a new way of doing things, and it's very, it's I don't want to say breaking the mold, but like it's new. So there had to be a bunch of research, lots of R&D, etc. But how now do you balance that research ambition that birthed this company, but now with commercial traction and urgency and what's like viable? as a
Yeah.
business?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of, especially maybe as a consequence of bringing sort of a new platform, um, these things are a little bit tied together, right? It's like you built, this is the first time this platform exists, right? Which also means that the applications is sort of the first time they exist, right?
Got
So
it.
we find ourselves actually on the commercial side, sort of pushing the frontier of what is possible. It's like really some of the questions is like, how compact can you make an AI model to get it deployed? We have to do this because people always are asking for the best, right? And so it's not like, oh, I'm curious about this, I'm just going to do this in a bubble. It's like, no, there is a customer pull that says, can you get me this bigger AI model on my system? Because then that will help me not have to say run that in my cloud server, which I would like not to do because I'm going to have to pay for that. Right.
Yeah.
So this ties together a lot of this research ambition with the commercial urgency. There are, of course, always going to be, other research questions that are not directly tied here. So this is sort of like, what is consciousness, right? Like that's probably not something that's a little bit far afield of where we are right now. But there are some very much, I don't think that these technologies that we're building or these sort of systems that we're building, I don't think they exist elsewhere, right? This is sort of the first time that they've been made. Some other examples of that is like, these mixtures of AI and like classic signal processing that we seem to be getting asked for a lot too. Just like, hey, what is the in the real world computer of the future going to do? There were like classical computers that everybody's had already in all of their devices, and now there's AI stuff. And actually, do they have to be separate, right? Can you marry them together to run the same workloads? It's something that doesn't seem to be very widespread. So I would say that a lot of the commercial urgency, because you are different to begin with, and you are trying to, not just be good enough, but be sort of the most loved, right, are really pulling a lot in the research direction. So I don't see them as so
Interesting.
divorced at our stage. But that doesn't mean that we're answering all research questions that we might have. Like there are.
Of
That's the
course.
wonderful thing is that, that you could ask any question you might have is, there's a lot to do in this world. So very, very few boring days to be had amongst all that.
Good stuff. Well, let's talk about building the team. Obviously, it's something that I focus on daily with my work, and I'm always curious to hear from founders in different walks of life, different products, how they do things. When you think about hiring for Femto AI, what traits do you look for beyond technical brilliance? Because I'm sure that's probably got to be top of the list.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's
Yeah.
you want to bring good people, and good people want to work with good people, right? Of course. So, but I will say that one thing that we do index on at Femto is sort of the intellectual curiosity, right? And this is kind of required because we're still very much startup phase, right? So what I mean by intellectual curiosity in an organization is something like, what is everybody else doing? Right? Like maybe I'm being brought in as an engineer or a product person or a salesperson, and there's different levels of, like, maybe I'm a hardware engineer or silicon engineer, or maybe I'm a firmware, right? What we look for is sort of, how does this person have the drive to figure out like how this fits uh, in the rest of the organization, right? It's like, if I am a chip designer, like I would want to be asking like, well, what's running on this chip, right? And why is it running there? Like, what is there a customer pull for these kinds of feature asks, right? So it's going to be a very tight integration up and down, sort of driven by a little bit internally by every individual who's trying to say like, are we actually doing the right thing? And the reason why they know it's the right thing or have awareness is because they're asking sort of, where does this all fit in? How does it fit together, right? So this is that curiosity that I'm talking about, is saying like, what sits above me, what sits below me, is what I'm doing like consistent with all that, or is it sort of like horizontal? Because I think that gets to sort of why this company is different than a lot of other companies, and we are sort of very much balanced throughout the system, right? It's not like it would be wrong to think of Femto as just a silicon company. It would also be wrong to think of Femto as just a AI like application company too. Like it's, both of the things are true, or both of these things we are doing, right? And so you require, and it's also how we can make systems that perform so well and are so efficient, because everybody is, has some awareness across the stack all the way up to the customer of, what we're trying to ultimately go over here.
Interesting. Okay, that's a very good way of thinking about it. In frontier tech, how do you earn credibility as a founder, whether that's with your team, the new people that you're hiring, or even just in the marketplace as well?
Mm-hmm. I think it's when you're at the frontier. Of course, you're not the alone at the frontier. It's very cool. It's sexy to be at the frontier. Everybody wants to go west. Young people.
Right.
But it also means that there is a fair amount of like hype, right? And especially when you talk with sort of the grizzled people who have worked in the world for a while, there's a lot of salt, right? To sort of, be skeptical of all that. So I think ultimately what builds the credibility is delivery, right? Is like, do the results of your actions result in what you were saying that they would, right? And, just keeping the checkbook, right? Is saying like, hey, you promised this and now you cashed a check, and, did you actually get what you wanted out of there? So, if I'm going to go and promise you like, best in class performance, like, better deliver on that, right? Sooner rather than later. And I think that's really helped us, win a lot of these customers, is that it's like, yes, this is real. You can go and download our software now off of Python pip, right? So you can try things out. You can go on the developer board. You can just try it, right? If you want, right? Whereas I think a lot of, especially when you're at the frontier, a lot of the sort of companies are still selling the, grandiose vision where it's like, it's amazing how far you can bridge these things. You can go from, I have a new configuration of matter that's going to replace the transistor in our computers, which is then going to deliver AGI. There's a few steps between there, but
Yeah.
You can always make the promise, right? And anybody who's sort of tried to build anything in the world will, look at you maybe a little skeptically. But if you can, of course, deliver, then you start to build credibility. Like credibility is definitely not something that's quick or easy to earn, and I think rightly so, because you just think of the dynamics between, customers who are trying essentially not to get tricked and trying to find a good deal versus the vendors who are trying to bring new approaches and win in the world. So everybody's sort of negotiating this in real time every day, with millions of these interactions every day. It's pretty amazing what I guess people are doing.
Yeah, for sure. In this period of realizing all of that, positioning yourself that way, building this kind of team, what have you learned about leading highly technical people?
For highly technical people, it's definitely about sort of giving them the authority and the power to like do the right thing, right? So, I think this is one of the things where, you keep asking why. It's like, why do you think that? Why do you think that? You'll get to some essential, unknown and opinion and judgment on the situation. It's like, I think this is the right thing to do. I think this is the right thing to do. And it's going to be on a gut feeling, right? Once you've established that, everything else kind of falls from that. Is like saying like, okay, if your gut is to go serve the wearables market or go serve the robotics market, like, fine. You're acting in a sort of low information environment. You had to make a sort of judgment call there. But once all of those sort of subjectives are fixed, then the path should be much clearer, right? So once you're down that path, then it's like, okay, let people do their job, right? To say like, well, okay, maybe we've had our disagreements or not about the right approach to a market, but once we settle on the approach and we've similarly given our opinions about maybe the right product for that approach, now a lot more comes into focus, and people give people quite the authority to essentially do their job, right? Maybe this is specific to working in sort of the deeper frontier tech. While I'm happy to talk about every layer of the system here, from the physical devices up through the features and customer experience, I'm definitely not going to be the expert in all of them, right? And so, you're talking about silicon designers, computer architects, firmware designers, compiler engineers, AI software tool, then, engineers,
All of
AI
it,
engineers
yeah.
themselves. Yeah, exactly. It's like, human can keep like 7 things in their mind at a time. That was probably 7 right there, and they're all their own fields, right? So you're never going to be, at some point as a founder, I guess you were going to transition from the point of literally doing all of those at one point to sort of bringing people on to drive those and really being the owner of that aspect of the product and the technology, right? So especially when it comes to sort of, high performers, highly technical people, kind of trust them, right? Trust them that they are going to be doing the right thing. Because at the end of the day, like, it's in nobody's interest in the company for the company to fail, right? So as long as you get the incentives aligned, you brought on, good people, let them do their work, let them do the job. And I know that's one of the maybe harder things, I think, for people, for founders in particular, to, I guess, transition from, because they might do things in a slightly different way. So you really have to be thoughtful, as like, does it really matter, whether you do it through path A or through path B? Is it going to be like, is this worth optimizing, kind of thing, versus like, okay, look at the bigger picture and let people operate, how they're most effective.
Yeah. It's a very good advice for founders that are building teams in general, I think, but trust and empowerment, when you bring people on, and as a founder, especially if you're a technical founder or technical founding team, it's very hard to empower people, relinquish control, and just trust that they're going to do what you've hired them to do without you, micromanaging or trying to do it all by yourself and stuff like that. And it's a big transition period for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's the only way you can go fast. You
Right.
get
Yeah,
a good
exactly.
team.
It's like,
Yeah.
you will have to, unless you do it all yourself, which, there is a line of meme thinking out there where it's like, we're going to have a 1 person and $1 billion company, but
Yeah,
we'll see about that.
is.
At least when you're dealing in the frontier of technology and the deep technology, this is proven to be an area that seems to be pretty resilient to sort of being swamped with, like large language models and foundation models just taking over. It's like, the world is complicated, way more complicated than, all the text of the internet or all the videos on YouTube and the internet, right? So this is definitely an area where it's very, I feel, people-centric on its development.
Yeah, makes sense. What's a belief that you had early on that you've since changed your mind about on this founder journey?
I think it gets back to some of those learnings of like, what is the incentive structure in academia versus commercial, right? So that maybe that was something that you could have always said, right? It seems like trivially true. It's trivially true on the surface, right? But actually appreciating sort of what that means down to the level of, what is the test program for this chip, right? who is the test vendor, right? Like, this is something that I don't think you so much appreciate. It's not so much a switch, like I believe that, oh, this was the right technology and I believe this other one. Is very much just sort of, because there's so many switches, it sort of blurs out. And because it's a continuum of saying like, well, you're going to be making trade-offs here of, what do you want to optimize for? Do you want to try to go for something that, for one instance out of a million, beats everything else in the world? Or do you want to make something that all million of these things work, reliably and well, and, and it satisfies all these customers, right? So I think that it's not so much a belief as, I guess, an appreciation for all of the many millions of details. I don't know if it's millions, but thousands of details that go into sort of commercializing sort of deep foundational technologies.
Is there a part of this journey that you can recount or that you can think of that stretched you the most personally?
Every day we're doing a lot of Pilates and yoga and stretching. Every day is a stretch. No, it's probably some of the bigger moments is, when we did our big pivot from basically PhD technology to commercial technology. I mean, that's a big jump there, right? Because you are essentially saying, I'm going to scrap everything I've done over the last 8 years, right? Over the last 7, 8 years in the PhD, and say that, well, this is maybe not the right system for what we're building, right? So you're making that decision, and you're saying, I'm going to rebuild this from the ground up, using the useful parts, or not necessarily the useful, useful is the wrong word, sort of commercial ready or commercializable parts. And yeah, that's, that was a pretty big, I guess, leap of faith. But to us, I guess, on the founding team, it was sort of quote unquote it just seemed like the right thing to do, right? It's like, when you find yourself sort of fighting against the system that you're in, whether it's belief system or technology system, you kind of start to ask, like, why? And so that's what actually that was part of the difficult part of the journey, was to have a very clear understanding and figure out, why is this technology that this brain inspired technology, like, why is it more efficient than, or better, higher performance than whatever else is out there, right? And then you keep asking why, maybe a theme that we go on, and then you maybe get something useful out of there. And then once we said that, hey, these aspects of this technology are really useful, we're just wrapping them up in a whole bunch of implementation details that's not helping us. Why can't we dispense them? Why can't we start over from the ground up and sort of build on the right foundations? So that was definitely a difficult part of the journey. That was definitely a point where we had big disagreements, with our professor who we did our PhDs with, right? And so it wasn't just that it was a deep technical thing; it was also a very personal thing, right? Because you're talking about approaches and technologies that people have spent significant parts of their lives doing, right? And I know this is definitely not the first time in human history that this has happened, but at least as the founding team, for better or worse, I guess we had the flexibility to sort of leave, some number of years behind of product, distill that down into essentially lessons, and then start rebuilding again from the ground up.
Yeah. It's true when you think about it like that. That's it's eye-opening, and just to realize, going through all of that and people's perspectives and then the emotional ties as well to all the work that you've done over the years, and the viewpoint you've had, the thesis that you've had, and all of that.
Yeah, the world is changing. I'm sure there's a lot of questioning of that more recently, rather than maybe tens of years ago. So
yeah, exactly. Every month something is new. Questioning makes you question all of it.
Yep.
On that note, I'm curious about where you think this space is headed over the next sort of 3 to 5 years, if you can even think that far ahead with everything that's.
No, yeah, I mean,
how fast everything's going.
I guess one of the fun parts of making a company and having customers is that you can see sort of what people are trying to do and where they're trying to go, right? So, it's like when you walk around the world, right, and you look at sort of all the living beings out there, right? It's, wow, as humans, we may be sort of in our seeing a lot more humans than otherwise. There's a lot of life out there, right? And they all have sort of different capabilities. Like a honeybee is very different from like a chimp is very different from a human, is very different from like a deer, right? What I'm imagining is a world where the devices that we have, whether it's the robots or the appliances or the wearables, they all have some amount of real lifelike kind of intelligence to them. Maybe it'll be a little bit like Avatar, where sort of the world itself feels like alive, because it's sort of that responsive to the environment, with the sort of intelligence, even if it's not like human level intelligence, that really maybe gives life a spark, right? So it's not going to be just like carbon based things that are squishy like us, right? That are that way, right? It'll be very much so like the electronics as well, which will be sort of a real mind bending kind of world, because you do have to start asking, like, okay, well, what makes, it's not just like what makes humans human compared to all other life. It's like what makes life different from the sand that makes up most of this planet's like crust, right? Essentially, right? And so that's a pretty wild world to be thinking about. But this is the thing that our customers are kind of trying to do, right? When you think about it, is like they're trying to create devices that are intelligent, that respond to the world, that provide, basically be like your butler, but on your face, right? And it's like, okay, well, let's see what we can do here. It'll be pretty interesting if that came to pass. But yeah, that's what I'm seeing. Maybe closer to the 5-year mark, that total thing. But there's definitely, it's not a black or white thing. It's not like there'll be a switch where it's like, oh my God, you went to it, you were put in like deep freeze and you woke up like Han Solo after some number of years, right? It's very much a sort of, okay, things seem to be getting smarter and smarter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And it's a great ride to be on for you. You got front row seat there.
Yeah,
Seeing all of this.
backstage.
Yeah,
Sort of backstage
true,
fast.
backstage.
You see the rehearsals going on.
Yeah. In the space right now, is there anything that you think is overhyped or anything that's underestimated?
Yeah, they're kind of two sides of the same coin, right? It's I think things become overhyped because, as humans, we only have a certain attention span and we sort of need like one thing to look at, right? So, but really whether you're thinking like, oh, it's the power wall or the memory wall or the fab capacity or the, foundation models hitting a limit in terms of like their scaling, like, these are all like reductions of the truth, right? The real world out there, like everybody's working on all of these things. So, I think that it's not going to be so much any individual layer, whether you think it's models or hardware or new research approaches, right? It's going to be putting it all together. That's sort of underappreciated, right? That's really where the job is, right? Is say like, okay, can you put together your latest AI research with deploying to a system? Can you make it reliable? Can it deliver real value? What is it? I think there was a term like there's $1 trillion question to say like, ultimately where are the sort of new revenue streams coming up? Not just the cost savings because we just, somebody decided that, AI was cheaper than, whatever they're paying people, right? Like that's not really the sort of vision that is just, like we're going for here. I mean, that's sort of maybe a consequence along the way, but yeah, putting it together and delivering the real value that's like, yes, I want this in my life, is a challenge because it's a lot of integration and it's very much under discussed there because it's so complicated.
Right.
So I understand why, but yeah, that was unfortunately not talked about enough.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard too much about that either. Let's do a quick fire round. I know we've only got a few minutes left, but wanted to throw a few questions at you. If you had to start over tomorrow with only $1 million and no team, what would you build in this day and age?
Honestly, I don't know. I've been doing this hard. I mean, I guess maybe here's what I maybe wouldn't do is I wouldn't start this company again, right? Because given the sort of not because it was hard or along the way, because the market timing, the window of opportunity, is only there for a certain time, right? I know that maybe if there are companies who are starting at this time, that it's a real challenge because they don't only get to say who they are, they also have to say who they are in relation to everybody else who's already done it, right? So it would probably be, a little bit different direction. But, day to day, like, of course, this is, bringing these little silicon brains into the world is the number one priority. So, I haven't really thought too much about, it's like, okay, what else would be interesting in life at this time? I'm sure there will be something interesting. It's just a matter of, sorry, the kid's here. Gotta focus. Yeah. Yeah.
What's one contrarian opinion that you hold about AI or robotics?
Man, there's so many opinions there. So what's contrarian anymore? Maybe I can cast my vote though. I can say that it's like, the current AI systems as they are that are deployed are not going to be the ones that take us to sort of that envisioned future where robots can do sort of everything. I am very much in the camp that, something fundamental is missing. They have been put in buckets of things like continual learning or, different kinds of reinforcement learning or, figuring out the difference between simulation and reality, right? But yeah, you got to have as few, maybe that's something I'm unsure about. I don't know if it's going to be incremental that will get there or will be an actual sort of innovation and breakthrough that'll get there. I mean, usually been close enough. Everything is a, innovation and breakthrough, but I don't know if they will reach that sort of popular opinion. So I definitely know I'm not the only one to have that opinion, but I think that the opinions are kind of shifting to this point, and they will as long as we feel like they're not quite there yet. And for a longer time, you'll see more people in this camp.
For sure. What kind of founder do you bet on every time when you're looking at new companies or projects?
So many things.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go back to that one thing that we look for even in our own employees is like, are they curious about the world, right? Are they fundamentally like, kind of in growth mode? Are they saying like, hey, I want to start this, but I know that I don't know a lot, and I'm willing and able to learn everything I need to learn along the way, because that's ultimately, maybe that's the G part of AGI, right? Is the sort of like, hey, the world is complicated. I only have the context that I've grown up with up to this point in time. The world might change, right? I might discover new information, and how are you gonna respond to that, right? What are you gonna do, right? So I think for people that are curious, they kind of seek this out, right? They don't try to sort of freeze everything and be very static to say like, no, I like the way the world is. I never want it to change, right? That's not the way the world works. Like that's sort of an artificial, set up maybe by our parents, maybe by like the structures around, but that's not the sort of underlying reality of things. And especially if you're a founder, you're by definition trying to do something new, at least in your local part of the universe, right? And so things will change because you are there to make a change, right? Otherwise, why would you be doing this? So I think that it's that adaptability, that curiosity that I think is going to get people ultimately to success.
Cool. Well, look, Sam, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been awesome learning about you and the company and your vision and stuff. It's been really great, and I'm glad I got to meet you guys and come to the meeting suite at CES, which is really cool. So thank you again for hosting me. How can our listeners learn more about you and Femto AI and follow along for everything that you guys are doing?
Yeah, so please check us out on our website, femto.ai, and we also have a developer portal, which is just developer.femto.ai. So, if you are trying to deploy AI out in the real world, in a real product that you can see, feel, touch, hold, you're probably going to be interested in the things that we have. So whether you're building AI models, we can help you, of course, do that, or you want to just take some off the shelf, we have the full suite of offerings. And we are excited to see kind of the world that people create using AI in the real world.
Amazing. Well, we'll link all of this in the show notes and definitely keep in touch for everything you guys have going on. But thanks again, Sam. This was great.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure.